we're ready. All right. So the scores overall were good on the test. So the point that most people lost was the number 1C. And the idea is that if you stretch something like this, it contracts according to Poisson's ratio in this direction and in that direction. So the information I gave you, it was like that longer off-axis dimension length change was given. And then, so this is exam 2, 1C. I think the wording was, what was the change in length? If you calculated the final length instead, I didn't take points off. What was the change in length of the skinny side? And I don't remember if I gave you a coordinate system. I thought you were Ali. I was like, early today, but no. Okay, so this is X, Y, and Z. And so Poisson's ratio is equal to negative strain YY over strain XX. And it's also equal to negative strain ZZ over strain XX. And you could calculate that this was 0.214. So we had 0.214 is equal to negative epsilon ZZ over, well, what were the strains? You have to. So for XX, what was it? Okay. And so then you can calculate strain ZZ. Hey. When Ali comes in, everyone's going to laugh. It's not as funny when you come in late. Okay, so strain EZZ is the same as strain EYY, and what is it? Negative 1.5 times 10 to the negative what? 5. Okay. That's not e to the negative 5, by the way. It's e negative 5. Oh. Yeah, so don't say that. Never again. Okay. And so then that means that by the definition of the ZZ strain, negative 1.5 times 10 to the minus 5 is equal to delta L over the original L, which is 0.008 maybe. That's all I got. I'll email you later when I figure out what the hell you're talking about. Okay, so there's the change in length on that side. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Ali. No. Yeah. It makes perfect sense now. Any other questions about the test? I don't really want to go through anything long right now. Most people were on the right track with stuff. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them outside of class. Okay. That's it for the exam. The next exam, now that you have that one back, you're ready for this one, is on Friday. That's the 31st. And that is everything up through internal loads and beams. Does anyone have any homework questions? So we're done with internal loads and beams. The next thing we go into is not going to be related to the test. But it didn't? Oh, not okay. An old one, but not a. All right. We haven't gotten anything new yet. No. The answer is I don't remember, but apparently not. Okay. Okay. Sure. Do you want to see what it looks like when you do a have a distributed load in a body where you use the rotation matrix? Yeah. Because that won't be on the test, but it's cool. So Nicholas changes his answer. Okay. I've done 9 and 11, and I'm doing 10. Well, I'm just like, you can just print out my class notes and submit it as your homework. It'll probably be wrong, though, somewhere. Okay, 10. This is internal loads. What's hard about number 10? Just a couple? I'll draw it. So it's a cantilever like this. And there's a 500 Newton force at the left, and there's a couple at the left of 600 Newton meters. And then there's a horizontal force of 1,000. And neglect the weight. And it gives some cross-sectional stuff that we don't need because that's for calculating stresses. And the length is 1.5 meters. We want the internal loads. And let's figure out where we're concerned about this thing breaking. Since the only unknown external loads are at the right endpoint, we can skip that and just go right to the cuts. The endpoints of the subfunctions are the endpoints of the beam and then the center. So n is equal to 3. And so there's 2 cuts. So cut 1 is for x's between 0 and 0.75. And so we're ignoring this force, we're ignoring the stuff over here. And so the only stuff acting is the 500 Newton force and the 600 Newton meter couple, and then the internal loads. So Newton's second law says 500, 0, plus T negative V is equal to zeros. And so T is equal to negative 500. V is equal to 0. And the moment equation about the z-axis, 500 doesn't produce any moment. The couple just adds on, so positive 600. And then plus m minus vx is equal to 0. So m is equal to vx minus 600, which is just that's what I was going to say next. And these are valid for x between 0 and 0.75. Yeah, torque is 0. Okay. I like this question because it's so confusing. Yes. And we're always starting from, we just decided to start from the right side to make our yeah. Side, right. And so our intervals are always chunks that don't start from the left side. Right. Our interval, the x's, that range of x's, just remember x refers to that right end. Okay. Right. And we're just starting at the left end because it's the most convenient for calculating stuff at that right end. X is the right end. Okay, so take your pen right now. Yeah. Pencil, it's going to hurt more with a pencil. And on your right hand, just write X. Okay? X is your right only. Your left is unrelated to X. So when you're in your test, you look at that and you say, like, yeah, X. That's the only side that depends, that has anything to do with X. Yeah, the length of it is somewhere between, so like this represents all these possibilities, like this being our chosen amount of beam, and this being our chosen amount of beam, and this, and this, and what all of these have in common is that they go from all the way at the left end to a length somewhere between 0 and 0.75. Uh-huh. No, not everybody. No. Okay. Yeah. The interval is from this starting point. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So X is the blue area then, correct? X is the still got it confusing. X is exactly X is where it goes from what we're isolating to the stuff that we're ignoring. Okay. X is right. This. X is that interface. Okay. And our general free body diagram is valid for any x values. So this location can be anywhere between just over 0, which would make it a skinny little tiny sliver, or 0.75, 0.74999999, which would make it almost exactly to the midpoint, but we don't get quite to that force. And as long as the x is between those two values, even though our free body has different lengths, it has all the same loads acting on it. And that's the key thing. It has these two things at the left end, and then nothing else but those internal loads.
Okay, so theoretically, where that blue arrow, force arrow, is going to the left, that's theoretically the halfway point, correct?
Right.
But what you're also saying is those same loads are being distributed anywhere else up to that halfway point as well, correct?
Yep. So right. If you think of these as being not general free bodies, but specific free bodies, we're taking a specific chunk of the beam. Here's what this one looks like. What are the loads? 500 and 600. Okay, so this one has a 500 and a couple of 600, and then the internal loads. This specific one, has a lot more material, but it's the same in that it only has the 500, the couple of 600, the internal loads. Okay, ... And then this one, it's a specific length of 0.7499. It has the same stuff. And so it's still being represented by our general free body diagram. But if I took made it one more little bit longer, but not, so what if I made it just a little bit longer? And now, since the right end has gone past 0.75, this free body diagram would have these. It would have the internal loads, but it would also have this, whatever that is, 1,000. And so this one is not represented by our general free body diagram anymore. It has an extra 1,000 Newton force. Yep. Yep.
But then the range is only from what we have, like,
right. Yeah. X only refers to the right side.
Yeah, I don't picture it so well. I know that it works like that, but I don't that for the second and third floor.
So the value of X, okay, so we're always going to isolate something from the left side because it's easier. We're always going to isolate something that starts all the way at the left side. And the right side is going to vary, okay? That's why we're going to call it X. So all X is telling you is how far you've gone from the left side. It doesn't tell you anything. We're not isolating a piece that's within that range. We're isolating a piece that goes all the way from the left end to some X value. And that X value, where the right end is, has to fall in that range. We're going, so the piece we isolate is going from X equals 0 to X equals X, you know? Yeah. Right. That's right.
So when you do cut 2, you're going to still retain information from cut 1, but you're adding on a new section.
Yeah, because, and the reason for that is that now when we go to cut 2, it'll look something like this. And this is not, this does not accurately reflect loads on any of the cuts before you get to that. And so this is only going to give us valid information for right ends that are between 0.75 and 1.5. You know, we still have to use the information from the first cut to represent the internal loads in that first half. I'm trying to think of like an analogy to, but I think whatever I think of is just going to make it worse. You just have to, I mean, really, like, the answer is here, okay? The answer you seek is in this statement. X refers to the right end, okay? If you get confused about it, just chant that to yourself, you know, and the meaning will become clear to you, okay? X refers to the right end. Yeah. Yeah, so just chant that to yourself and eventually, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's really all there is to it. Like, X refers to the right end. It doesn't say anything about where the left end is. Like, you take a trip from here to St. Louis, you know, and so someone talks about the trip as like the trip to St. Louis, and then you're like, no, I started in Minnesota. Yeah, but St. Louis is the destination. St. Louis only refers to the destination, you know? The other stuff, that's not contained in that information about St. Louis. You know what I mean? It's the same with this. That's a ridiculous place to take a road trip to, but that's just, and this X, it's the same thing. Like, the trip, this is like, this beam is taking a trip to X. Oh, but what about all the other stuff it went through? No, we're only talking about where it went to. The right end is X. Yeah, exactly. I know. Oh, really? In St. Louis? Huh. You can drive to Carbondale from there. University of Southern Illinois. I don't know. That's not so great either. Okay, so now the second cut. Cut 2 is for X values from 0.75 to 1.5. So my left end should be at 0.75 or what? No. No. That X only refers to the right end. Yeah.
But so actually, no, it's not like only for the right hand, but all the forces we have from the left.
Yep. And so Newton's second law says 500 0 plus negative 1,000 0 plus t negative v is equal to zeros. So t is equal to positive 500. What was it before? Negative 500. V is still equal to 0. And then the moment equation about the z-axis, we have 600 plus m minus vx equals 0. So m is equal to negative 600. And these are valid for x between 0.75 and 1.5. Okay, so let me say one more thing about that thing. Like if it's, I mean, this is confusing for every person who starts doing this stuff. But you can do this problem without understanding it, first of all.
Yeah.
You can do it without understanding it. So maybe you don't really care about understanding it. You just want to know how to do the problem. But if you want to understand it, go back to the thing where I started to derive this approach and isolate a finite piece and calculate the internal loads of that finite piece, and then just think through yourself how you would generalize that into calculating internal loads by x. And I mean, I think a lot of times just deriving something yourself is the way to understand it, you know. But that's a lot of work. So if you don't want to do it, then just do what I said and don't ask me any more questions about it. Yeah. Yeah.
What else do we all principal stress? We have principal stress, right? Principal stress is,
Those are diagonal numbers.
yeah, no.
After you, those are the normal stresses, but in the principal stress, all you have is those diagonal ones. Yep, and those are the principal stresses. Principal stress is the one where you take the eigenvalues. Those are the eigenvalues of the stress tensor.
How would you
Part B. Oh, so the stress tensors. Well, that's the next thing we're going to get into. But yeah, but to calculate the stress tensors, you calculate the stress tensor due to that internal tension we calculated, the stress tensor due to the shear force, stress tensor due to the bending moment, and the stress tensor due to the torque. And you add up all those stress tensors. Yep. And so what I have to do is give you those four calculation approaches: stress due to tension, shear force, bending moment, torque. What?
One question on the torque,
Yeah.
if we have a given torque, like either going right or left, just always do it as positive.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, so I can represent torques two ways. Okay. I can represent it as a positive number and show the direction of the torque, or I can do it as a counterclockwise arrow and make this positive or negative. This is both of them because it is counterclockwise. But if this said 600 and I drew the arrow clockwise, then you would enter it in here as a negative 600.
Oh, okay.
So counterclockwise is positive when you go to the rotational equation.
600. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Mhm.
And for torque, if we're given like a torque, like let's say 1000 is a torque, but it's going in the negative direction. We need, and we have like 10 joint or fixed joint, right? So we need to draw a torque that represents that. Do we do it always in the positive direction, like what do we call it?
That's what I would do, just draw it in the positive direction and then give the direction with the sign of the number. That's how I do it. Yep. I feel like we're at a point right now where like everyone wants to ask questions about the test, but no one actually has any questions. I mean, that's a good place to be, you know. Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, traction.
The engine.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. With traction vector? Oh, yeah. Oh, whoa. And I never did it. Yeah, okay. Let's finish that. For the test, no, but just to, I mean, to sort of as a way to store in your head why you would ever want to do this, I think it's really good. So, yeah, let's think about that. I said I was going to do it and I didn't finish the problem. So first, let's graph these all out. So we have the tension, shear force, and bending moment. The shear force was 0 everywhere. The bending moment was negative 600 everywhere. And the tension was, I think it was negative 500 and then positive 500. Okay, so this one isn't very interesting, but I mean, we learned that there are no points to be particularly concerned about. It's either had, so let's look at what these all say. Tension compression. Materials tend to be, like if you're talking about an actual material, not a some kind of weird like honeycomb thing that you've designed out of a material or a hollow tube or something weird. It tends to be equally strong in tension and compression. So based on this, we really can't say any places are in more danger of breaking due to tension or compression than any other one. All we know is that right at this single point in the middle, we don't know what the value is. But everything else has an absolute value of tension that's the same. Okay, so far we don't have really any information. So let's go on and look at the other two. The shear force is the same everywhere. So that doesn't, favor any points over others. And then the bending moment is the same everywhere. So that doesn't favor any. So what this says is that every point on this beam is equally likely to break in this loading environment. And so, you do something like this. So say that you have something made out of the beam is a hollow tube, And the reason, I've probably mentioned that before, the reason I think about this is like, this is what they do with bike frames. Like I'm really into bike stuff. And so if you did this internal loads analysis on a tube on a bike, like the top tube, you'd get functions for tension, shear force, bending moment, torque. And what you would see is that close to the place where that top tube connects to the seat tube, and also close to where it connects to the head tube. I don't know if you can picture but the top tube is the tube on your bike that's hurt you the most times. And then the seat tube is what your seat goes into, and the head tube is what the handlebar is attached to. And at those two ends of the top tube, you'd see there are big spikes in bending moment, maybe shear force too. I've never done that calculation. And so what that says is, okay, all things being equal, we're really concerned about this top tube breaking close to the head tube, like where it's welded, or close to the seat tube. And the way they fix that problem is they make the walls of the tube much thicker at the place where it connects over here and the place where it connects here. You could just make the whole thing thicker, but sometimes you don't want to do that for cost reasons. In bikes, you don't want to do it for weight reasons. You want to keep it as light as possible. And so you put all the material in the two places where this thing is in danger of breaking, you know. And then in the middle where the internal loads are really low, you make those, like a steel bike frame has tube walls that are less than 1 millimeter in the middle of the top tube. So thin, you know, and then you bulk it up out here. Yeah, well, at the two connection points is where all the stress is. Yeah. So that's the motivation for doing problems like this, is trying to figure out, like, where do we have to concentrate our efforts to keep this from breaking by putting more material or a different kind of material. Yep.
Without jumping ahead,
Mhm.
in the first graph with the particular line going up and
Yeah.
down from -500 to 500, is that an indeterminate?
Yeah, it is.
Something, because
Yep.
one thing I've come to see now is there some sort of mathematical quantification for the materials we're calculating for. So something has to be quantified.
Yeah.
And so therefore there's something going at between -500 and 500. There's some sort of continuity, but something just suddenly changes there. That sort of, so I'm seeing the mathematical behaviors with the property.
Yeah, so what it really is so a point force is always just a mathematical, like, it's a simplification. Nothing really happens at a point, you know.
Right.
Even if that force was applied by a sharpened knife point, you know, at some magnification that's still spread over an area, you know. So really, instead of this being a point force at that point, it's some kind of distributed load just over a tiny little area. And so this isn't really vertical. It really has a very small slope. It's just not worth calculating that. So in here, in between these two, it can take any of the values from here to here.
Kind of like massive.
Yeah. So we don't know what it is, but we know it's not 600, you know. We know it's in between those two. Any other questions about internal loads? Just sort of general, yeah.
Given that, wouldn't you be extremely concerned with it?
Yeah, is there a way we can do a stress tester with all of that in there, or?
The stuff we just did. That's the next thing we're getting into, and it'll take a couple weeks to get through it because we have to learn how to calculate a stress tensor due to the tension part, then a stress tensor due to the shear force part, bending moment, torque. So that's 4 ways of calculating stress tensors, and then we just add those 4 together. So traction says the stress tensor times the outward facing normal, the alien, is equal to the traction vector. And if n is the outward facing normal to a face on the stress cube, then the traction is just the tractions you see on that face of the stress cube. That made more sense in my head. You see on that face of, so let me show you what I mean. So let's say that we have, so let's say this is the stress cube. Let's say we have 10 megapascals, 5 megapascals, and symmetry says this also has to be 5. And then 8, symmetry says this has to be 8. And then 2, symmetry says this has to be 2. And then 4, and then 5. So that's a state of stress at a point. The stress tensor, if we're using this coordinate system, is 10, -5, -8, and then -5, -4, 2.
The next one is the XY.
Yeah, XY.
Oh, I got it.
Okay. No, that you're right. I was just looking at them wrong. Yeah. So the Y one is the -5. Yeah, and then Z. So this is -5, and then -8, +2, and -5. So if you take the 3 components on any face, those are the tractions on the face. And so, and the ones we can't see are the negatives. They have to be equal and opposite to the opposite face. So now let's figure out the traction on the positive x face is a positive x component of 10, a negative y component of 8, nope, a negative y component of 5, and a negative z component of 8. You can see that from the picture here, and if you do that calculation, so the traction on the x face, I mean, it could be 0, but yeah, we'll do that, yeah. So 10, -5, -8, -5, -4, 2, -8, 2, -5. What's the alien for the positive x face? Yep, 1, 0, 0. And so the traction on the positive x face is 10, -5, -8. And then the traction on the, let's do it on the negative y face. Okay, so what's the traction first on the positive y face? What's the x component? The traction on the positive y face is an x component of -5, a y component of -4, and a z component of +2. And so that means that on the negative y face, there should be a traction of +5, +4, -2. Now, what's the alien of the negative y face? 0, -1, 0. And if you do that multiplication, you get 5, 4, -2. just like what we reasoned out from looking at the stress tensor.
If you did a traction on the X case with the normal vector that's not in that, like 30
At an
degrees-
angle.
30 degrees above it.
Mhm.
Then you just, for your normal vector, you just put sine 30, put sine 30.
Yeah. Right. Yes, that's right. And so there's a relationship between those tractions and what you get when you look at a stress tensor in a new coordinate system. But it's still a little complicated because, so now you have that traction vector, but you have it expressed in the wrong coordinate system, you know? But, okay. So next time, if you have any pressing issues on this stuff, I'd be happy to answer some questions, but otherwise, let's get to the new stuff. Oh, quiz on Wednesday. Yes, we need to get back to quizzes. Yeah, just everything. Yeah. Okay.